little time to write that down if you're writing. Of course, one of these men didn't come from around the Sea of Galilee. Who was that? Judas. Judas came from Judea. Yeah. But the rest of them came from up around the shore of Galilee, as far as concerned. They were attracted to him because he was totally unselfish as far as that's concerned. And he put his life into these men to carry on. So he not only taught them, but he showed them by his daily life as far as what it meant to be a servant and to serve the Father and the thing as far as servanthood is concerned. And then two disciples came to him, James and John. The sons of thunder were their nicknames, of course. And in Mark 10, it says, verse 35 through 37, then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him, saying, Teacher, we want you to do something for us whatever we ask. He said to them, what do you want me to do for you? Verse 37, they said to him, grant us that we may sit, one on your right hand and one on your left, on the other, in your left hand, in your glory. And Jesus takes them aside and he says, listen, here's the thing, verse 41. And when the 10 heard it, they became greatly displeased with James and John. But Jesus called them to himself and said to them, you know that those who are considered rulers over the Gentiles lord over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. Yet it shall not be so among you. But whoever desires to become great among you shall be to be your servant. And there he defines, this is what it means to be a servant. If you're going to be the greatest among us, you're going to have to be servant of all. The Gentiles had commanders, sergeants, privates, and then he says it would not be so among you. Last week we also talked about Mr. Bernstein, the great conductor and composer, was asked what the hardest instrument is to play, and he said second fiddle. Finding someone who wants to play second. You find a lot of people want to play first, but how many people want to play second? Not very many. Mark 10:43 says, whoever wants to be greatest among you must be servant of all. Your next blank there is of all. Even the Son of Man came not to be served. Your next blank there is not to be served. So he's setting this example. As we're studying him and understanding about him, he said, this is what it's like. I didn't come to be served, but to serve, to give right down to his very life. But what about his enemies? Could they see the difference in him? John 17:32, the Pharisees heard the crowd murmuring these things concerning him. And the Pharisees and the chief priests sent officers to take him. Then verse 45 through 46 in John chapter 7. Then the officers came to the chief priests and the Pharisees and said to them, why have you not brought him? And the chief officers answered, no man ever spoke like this man. That's your blank right there. No man ever spoke like this man. So as they listen to you speak with such authority and yet so humble and so kind and so loving, so much compassion, nobody's ever spoke like this man. So selfless, self-forgetful, so occupied with others, so competent. The greatest problem in the church today is people can't get along with each other. Your blank there is each other. You see a little triangle down at the bottom there, the I, me, mine, myself. It's just this struggle is this continual thing of everybody wants to do what they want to do, and they're not that concerned about others as far as that's concerned. But the answer, so we see this as going, okay, what's the answer? How do we overcome? How do we become stronger in these things? Just a couple of things I want to share with you before we go into our scriptures there in Matthew chapter 5. With great sarcasm, Wilbur Reese wrote, I'd like to buy $3 worth of God, please. Not enough to explode my soul or disturb my sleep, but just enough to equal a warm cup of milk or a snooze in the sunshine. I don't want enough of him to make me love a black man or pick beets with a migrant worker. I want ecstasy, not transformation. I want the warmth of the womb, not a new birth. I want a pound of the eternal in a paper sack. I'd like to buy $3 worth of God, please. Well, as I look at this and as I think about this lesson, a lot of people want God. A lot of people want to be like Christ. But how much? How much? when you get right down to it, Jesus is saying, if you're going to follow me, you're going to deny who? Self. And you're going to take up your cross. You're going to follow me. That's where it really thins out the herd. That's where it thins because we're going, wait a minute. What does it mean to follow him? You know, we've spent weeks talking about the basic foundational things of Christianity and studying all the scriptures, and hope that's been beneficial to you. Been beneficial to me. But then after we learn all those things, what do we do with it? Then we must become a servant. We got to kind of lay everything aside and go, okay, now then, regardless of what's happened in the past, what I've done, hadn't done, how things have been, now then, what am I going to be satisfied with? What is God satisfied with? What must I be going toward as far as concerned? $3 worth of God just doesn't cut it. The reason the church is in condition it is today, the world over, is because most people want $3 worth of God. You know, just enough in the paper sack, just a pound, enough for us. Got a comment?
I just want to say $2, but I was going to ask, I mean, what you said, the I, the me, and all that. When I was little, I used to think, what's such a big deal about that?
Yeah.
And I couldn't really understand, you know, so what if a person says I or me or, you know, but I ended up dealing two different places with it. We formed a fire station and built a fire truck, and me and three other guys did the welding and all this stuff on it, and we built this truck. And then the fire chief come in, we go someplace with it, you know, and whatever, he would talk about how he did this, I did that, you know, and everything was I and I and I. And
Yeah.
we all kind of thought, well, you know, what does he think he's doing? And
Yeah.
it creates that burning inside.
Yeah.
of you.
Yeah.
And it wasn't probably a month or two after I remembered that coming up, then I had a member of the church come in, and he would say, I need you to do this, or I need you to do that, or he was always pointing out things for that he wanted done. And then if we did it or whatever, like if we sprayed the parking lot or whatever we did, if we mowed grass or whatever extra we did,
Yeah.
then he would come back and say, oh, I did this or I did that. And so
Yeah.
I could really see where stuff like that would cause ruffled feathers inside the church.
Yeah, yeah. And it's just it's our nature. I mean, it lends itself to so many things do. And I don't think a lot of times we even realize it. I mean, for the most part, it's just kind of the way things are and the way it's said and that kind of stuff, you know. But when we look at lessons like this, we go, well, what's really the essence of this? Well, the next statement is self is our greatest enemy. Got lots of enemies in my life. I got a lot of enemies now. But my greatest enemy, myself, you know. That's the reason to me, you know, I wrote these lessons years ago. That's the reason to me it's so important I go back over, because sometimes we go, well, I got that. No, we don't ever have this, you know. The people who think they have it, the ones who have the least. Because what it boils down to, you go, no, wait a minute, you don't conquer this. This is me. This is self. This is the thing, you know, as far as that's concerned. J.B. Phillips, in his book, When God Was Man, he talked about this selfishness in the book. And he said, he made these things, and you'll be reminded of Matthew 3. We're going to look at that in just a moment here. But he says, happy are the pushers, for they get on in the world. Happy are the hard-boiled, for they never let life hurt them. Happy are those who complain, for they get their own way in the end. Happy are the blasé, for they never worry over their sins. Happy are the slave drivers, for they get results. Happy are the knowledgeable men in this world, for they know their way around. Happy are the troublemakers, for they make people take notice of them. You know, we look at the world, people around us, and we go, that's not, well, sometimes it is. We get drawn up in that as far as concerned. And then when we look at Matthew 5, beginning in verse 3, of course, this is the Sermon on the Mount. We're not going to spend our whole study on this, but a whole lot of growing as servants and understanding and defining servants is here in Matthew 3. That's the reason he uses this sermon. It's so profound. Matthew 5, verse 3, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the poor, pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye when men revile you and persecute you, and say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. And so when you look at this lesson, and you can imagine Jesus teaching this lesson, you know, he's going, okay, here's where he's really laying out what it means to be a servant. The blessed here, of course, means happy. I mentioned that a while ago as far as J.B. Phillips is concerned. Happy are the people who do this. Now, he's not just talking about happiness and jolly and merry-making things. He's talking about deep down. This word actually means deep down, abiding happiness. Well, I just want to pause right here just for a moment, just kind of pull over just for a little bit and ask you a question. What about your happiness tonight? Are you really happy? What makes you think you're happy? You know, I think that's a worthwhile question. I asked that question to my brother years ago when he was in the pig pen, driving down the road in his new car. I said, let me ask you a question. Are you happy? He said, yeah, I'm happy. You're riding in my new car, got all new clothes, got a great job, got a great income, got a great girlfriend, party all the time. Life is great. I said, but are you happy? What do you mean? I said, when you lay down to sleep at night, the party's over, nobody's there, you're sober, you know what's going on as far as life's concerned, and it's just you. You can't see all the stuff. Are you happy with you? He pulled that car over the side of the road and he said, let me tell you something. You know I'm not happy. Let me tell you something else. I said, what's that? His very words were, I would trade lives with you in a New York second. I said, okay, let's do it. I mean, you can't have my wife and kids, but you can have my lifestyle. He said, how would we go about that? I said, you get rid of it all. Kiss your girlfriend goodbye, quit your job, sell everything, whatever you want to. Nothing but this, you hang on this car right here, your clothes, your television. I'll be back to get you in 2 weeks. I was working down here at Hollis at the boys' home, farm and ranch manager down there. I said, you can come to work for me. He took me up on it. That was a long time ago. A lot of water's gone over the bridge since. He's the elder of the church, been an elder for years down in Alabama. It's incredible what he's done as far as his life's concerned. He threw his last carton of cigarettes in Dad's garbage can in front of Dad's house before we left. Never lit up another cigarette. Never drank another drop. You got to admire people. I know that's my brother, but you're going, oh, wait a minute, you know. Well, I believe that's what it is. You know, when you go, wait a minute, why do I think I'm happy? Am I really happy? You see, a servant is really happy, deep down happy. And it comes out that they're happy. They don't just go around talking about it, bragging about it. You can just see it, the lifestyle, the things that are happening. He and I have had this conversation numerous times since then. In fact, years later, he had me take his children one by one, pull them off to the side, and tell them the story, what happened. He wanted them to hear it from my point of view. They'd heard it from him. I'm convinced that, brethren, sometimes we need to just kind of stop a little bit and go, wait a minute. Am I really happy? Or do I just got a lot of stuff, a lot of things going on, and what's happening for us? You know, well, real true, what we're talking about, the servant is really, truly happy because they're following his will, doing his will. That's what he's saying here in Matthew 3. These are the things. Happy are the humble, for they already know, belong to the kingdom of heaven. Now notice the beginning of this lesson right here, Matthew 5:3, when Jesus gives this, he says, happy are the poor in spirit, for there's the kingdom of heaven. He begins this with this one with a purpose, with a reason. This is the beginning of everything. Happy are the poor in spirit. Well, what does it mean to be poor in spirit? What that means is, happy are the people who bring nothing to the table spiritually. I've got nothing to offer spiritually. God, you have everything to offer. I've got nothing to offer. I can't save myself. I can't reason, I can't think, I don't know. It all begins with that. Isn't it interesting? He starts out with, blessed are the poor in spirit, you know. That's people who say, I don't know it, I can't do it, but I'm willing to learn, you know. I can't afford anything. And God says, oh, okay, now then, you're in the right state of mind. See, I think we begin the plan of salvation at the wrong place. We begin the plan of salvation with hearing, believing, repenting, confessing, being baptized. Well, we should start it with, bless the poor in spirit. Blessed are the humble, you see. Blessed are the people that know they can't control a life. Then they're ready to hear, you see. It's a whole different kind of hearing. I deal with people all the time like that. We don't start out with hearing. We start out with poor in spirit. Here's the thing. I can't control a life. I can't control other people's lives. Can't control my life. Can't control your life, you see. But then we have an ear for, you see. And he says, okay, when you get that, here's the next thing. Blessed those that mourn, for they shall be comforted. And he walks right through the thing. Here's empathize. Feel what people are going through, how they're suffering, how they're struggling, as far as those kind of things are concerned. Happy are those who know what sorrow means. On your sheet there, what sorrow means. Have you mourned with anybody lately? Have you felt sorrow with anybody lately? A true servant spends a lot of time with people's sorrows. I go through a lot of Kleenex in my office every week through tears. It's not always just the people I'm studying with. I shed them too. But knowing what sorrow is. What are the things? What breaks your heart? What are the people that you're dealing with? What breaks their hearts? For they will be given the courage and the comfort when we sorrow with others. Happy are those who claim nothing, for the whole world belongs to them. Claim nothing. Just imagine that. Well, no wonder they're happy. They're not all worried about what's going to happen to everything. They know it all burns in the end anyway, you know. God blesses us with whatever we need, you know. They're not worried about. Isn't it amazing how much we fret and worry about our stuff and material things and things of that nature? He says, happy are they because the world belongs to them. Happy are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be fully satisfied. Hunger and thirsting for righteousness. You know, we hunger and thirst for lots of things, a lot of food, a lot of stuff, you know. But how much do we hunger and thirst for righteousness? Have you meditated on that lately? Have you thought about it lately? Have you studied it? Am I really into understanding, appreciating what true, real righteousness is and wanting and craving that? Happy are the kind and pure, for they'll see God. The kind and pure. Could you use some more kindness in your life? Could people be a little more kind to you? Could you use a little more purity, you see? Because basically what's happening is, what he's saying here is, we're getting back what we're putting out. As we put out kindness, we're getting back kindness, you know. When we put out purity, we're around purity. It's just amazing how it comes back at us. True happiness is to serve and to give. Your next blank there is serve and to give. This is what true happiness is. And if you're truly happy, that's what you're doing. If other people are truly happy, they're serving and they're giving. Some might ask, did it happen to the early church? Did it really catch on? Yes, it did. In a remarkable man, less qualified naturally, brilliant, man of letters, narrow-minded, religious, prejudiced, a zealot, we know him as Paul. There were others, but one of the great examples Holy Spirit gives us is this man's life. One of the most unlikely people you'd ever meet or think would ever get this, got it. I think that's the reason God chose him, because everybody's going, oh, if this guy can do it, anybody can do it. He was so full of what? Himself. It was all about him. He made sure everybody knew it was all about him. And then, when it turned around, you realize, well, you know who Saul became Paul then. Given a thorn in the flesh. And next blank there's thorn in the flesh. 2 Corinthians 12, 7 through 10. Let's turn over to 2 Corinthians 12, 7 through 10. Unless I should be exalted above measure, through the abundance of the revelation, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure. For this thing I besought the Lord thrice, 3 times, that it might be departed from me. And he said to me, my grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, I will rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in necessities, in persecutions, in distresses, for Christ's sake. For when I'm weak, then I'm strong. I become a fool in glorying. Yea, ye have compelled me. For I thought I ought to have been condemned of you. For in nothing am I behind, and very the chiefest of apostles, though I be nothing. And so when we look at Paul's life, 3 times he asked for this to be removed. And 3 times God said, my grace is sufficient for you, my grace is sufficient for you. For my strength has been made perfect in weakness. So I'm happy about my weaknesses. Then Christ's power can live in me. Now when this mindset happens, and you've studied this before, you understand what's taking place here. Then Paul's mindset has changed, going, wait a minute, if he's giving me the same answer over and over and over, obviously I'm not getting it. He didn't need the thorn taken away. He needed the thorn. You got any thorns? Are there any things that afflict you? Any physical thing that you're going, why can't I seem to get a handle on this? Have you noticed how, because of our nature and how if there's one little thing, here the Holy Spirit calls it a thorn. We don't know what it was. Some people thought it was his eyesight because he wrote big letters. Some people thought it was asthma because he moved away from the sea to enter inland during the wintertime. We don't know for sure what it was. And I think purposely he didn't tell because he didn't want us to be able to say, oh, I got the same thing Paul had, and that's the worst thing ever. No. Whatever it is, it's your thing. It was his thing, and it didn't matter, you see. But it's a thorn in the flesh. But it was something physical. I've heard preachers say, well, it had something spiritual. No, this is a physical thing he had to deal with. I'm not going to have to show of hands, but I should ask, who doesn't have a physical thing to deal with? We have our thorns, we got our things to deal with. And yet he says, okay, obviously I need to look at this different. Maybe it's my weaknesses that I need. Now notice the list of things he gives here. He says, therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in necessities, in persecutions, in distresses for Christ's sake. For when I'm weak, then I'm strong. How long has it been since you rejoiced in persecutions, reproaches, necessities, difficulties? You see, our nature is not to rejoice in that. Our nature is to go, we talk about it. We hash it over. We worry about it. We talk to people about it. We go, let's just get rid of this. Well, that's our nature. But did you ever think maybe possibly, there could possibly be a possibility that we could need this stuff? What for? Why would anybody need it? Because look what happened to Paul, you see. Paul goes, wait a minute. Now I've learned I need this because Christ's grace can work within me with this. See, so many times I talk to people about hardships and trials and things they're going through. And I'm sure you do too, and you think about yours. Could that possibly be a good thing? Could it possibly be a great thing? Have you ever thanked God for your trials and the persecutions, difficulties you go through? You see, when we really get it, we do. We go, oh, wait a minute. I need this. I need just the amount it is right now to help me realize the reality of it's not about the physical. It's about the spiritual. I need to trust His grace at this time and in these ways. He wrote letters like Philippians 2, verse 3. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. I don't know what your verse for the week is or what you're memorizing or what you're learning, but I'd highly recommend this one because he's saying, look at this. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit. Boy, just imagine how different the world would be if we get rid of that. Or even if individuals get rid of it. But in lowliness of mind, what is that? That's humility, humbling ourselves. Let each of us esteem others better than himself. Esteem means to lift up. Esteem them. If we lift up others, He said, if you lift others will lift you up, but God will lift us up, you see, because he says he gives grace to the humble. Uh-huh.
The thought that I'm having, when Jesus found out that Lazarus had died, he went to be by himself before he went 4 days.
Yeah.
And he wanted to be by himself because he had that natural emotion of sadness.
Yeah.
He wanted to mourn. But the people found out where he was, and they came, they thronged him. And immediately he forgot about his worries and he went and served. I think that's as hard a lesson for me to learn. I've told other people that have gone through that. If you want to get over your hurt, go help somebody
right.
with theirs.
That's right.
Right away. Don't wait. Go do it. And that'll pass by quickly, and you can serve other people and raise them up. It takes your mind off of yourself, selfishness,
Exactly.
and go serve.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's as hard as doing what the Sermon on the Mount.
Oh, yeah.
That's difficult, I think. We got to learn that.
But you can see the Lord in that. I mean, exactly. That's a perfect example. And there's so many examples like that of going, wait a minute. There's an answer. There's a solution. There's a thing to be done. But it's almost the opposite of what we think. You know, who wants to serve when they're feeling bad, or things are not going well, or they're not happy? Huh? When we serve, we go, wait a minute. That's what brings us out and helps us overcome. A great example for us to serve. We say, but that's not the way large churches operate. Jesus said, it shall not be known among you. Now, here's our key. Don't get discouraged about what's happening in the world, in the church, what's going on. Here's your key. Here's your answer. And it's so simple, see? It's amazing how simple God makes everything. He says, here's the solution as far as overcoming and dealing with things. The only head is Jesus. Your blank there is head and Jesus. Now, what we got to be focused on, going, wait a minute, there's not but one head. There's only one leader among us, one head of everybody. Well, I know we have organizations in the church and elders and deacons and preachers and teachers, those. But at the same time, he said, really and truly, everybody's under that. You see, nobody's greater than, he's the head of everything as far as sermon. The rest qualify as servants. We're all the same. We're all simply servants. Is that easy? It's impossible for the flesh. That's why we've got to say, it's all His. It's all His. Now, we make it all His. That's the common denominator for everything. Nobody's better, nobody's worse. It's all His deal. It's His deal. Whatever happens to us good, whatever happens to us bad, whatever happens to us, whatever happens to us, it's His altogether. Matthew 13, 44 through 46. I love these few verses right here because so much is summed up in this. And you all remember this as the pearl of great price. And Jesus told this story. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and hid. And for joy over it, he goes and sells all that he has and buys the field. Verse 45. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant who seeks beautiful pearls, who when he has found one pearl of great price, he went and sold all that he had and he bought it. Now, if you'd have been there and Jesus said these words, because there were people there when he said these words, he's not just philosophizing or writing this down. There's people actually listening to these words, and they hear him say, again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and hid. And for joy over it, he goes and sells all he has, buys the field. Now, these people, not like us, we don't experience this whole lot kind of thing, but these people knew about treasures been hidden. In most cases, they didn't have banks. They didn't have places they could put money in safe things. They buried things all the time. In fact, I'm told, I've studied where young Israelite boys go around and one of their favorite things to do is treasure hunt. There's stuff buried all over Israel where they buried this stuff. And so they knew about, or they'd found treasures, different kind of thing. It's amazing. Well, he says here, look at this. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure that's hidden in a field. It's out there. It could be found, but it's a treasure. And he says, a man found it, and when he found it, he hid it. He reburied the thing right in the same field. And then what does he do? For joy over it, he goes and sells everything he has. He buys the field. He's got to have the treasure. He buys the field. He realizes this treasure is worth everything it costs, everything I've got. You ever seen anything in your life that you could take everything that you own, all the property you own, all the stuff you own, all the jewelry you own, and you go, sell all that, and if I could just buy that right there, it'd be worth more? I do want to show of hands. How many of y'all, I'm sure many of us have seen the Hope Diamond? Hope Diamond? Several of us have. You know, I stood there and looked at that Hope Diamond. It's huge. When they turn off the lights, it keeps glowing. It's incredible. It's, of course, Washington, D.C. down there. When they let you see it, and then it goes way down in a shaft in the ground. I thought, man, I'll never see probably anything worth more than that Hope Diamond. I mean, it's unbelievable. But I guarantee you I can sell everything I've got 100 times and not buy the Hope Diamond. It's incredible. But this guy sees some treasure. Now, the point Jesus is making is some things are worth everything that you can muster up. And he says the kingdom of heaven is worth that. Well, if it's that valuable and that wonderful, what are we willing to give for it? Then he says in verse 45, again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant seeking beautiful pearls, who, when he has found one of great price, went and sold all that he had and bought it. He finds this one pearl and says, this is worth everything I've got. If I could possibly do it, I'm going to sell everything I've got and buy this one pearl. Now, what Jesus is doing, he said, I want you to focus on, not just for them, but also for us, the value of the kingdom of heaven. What is the kingdom of heaven? The kingdom of heaven on earth is the church. The kingdom of heaven in heaven is heaven, God's throne, where he's at. So there's a spiritual kingdom here. But he's talking about the kingdom. He says, when you get the kingdom, if you can be in the kingdom, he says, it's worth everything that you can give. Now, sometimes we think about being a servant. We go, well, I'll do that to a limit. There's a certain way, a certain amount. And God said, no, you don't get it. There's a certain amount. It's everything that you can dig up. Everything that you can get. Just like buying the pearl. Just like buying the treasure. If you really want it, here's what you're going to do. You're going to sacrifice everything for it. And I'm sure you've heard it before. We've used it here as far as the church is concerned. But I want to remind you of the modern day analogy again of this. And it goes, I want this pearl. How much is it? Well, the seller says it's very expensive. Well, how much, we ask? Well, a very large amount. Do you think I could buy it? Oh, of course, anyone could buy it. But didn't you say it's very expensive? Yes. Well, how much is it? Everything you have, says the seller. We make up our mind. All right, I'll buy it, we say. Well, what do you have? He wants to know. Let's write it down. Well, I have $10,000 in the bank. Good, $10,000. What else do you have? That's all. That's all I have. Nothing more? Well, I do have a few dollars in my pocket. Well, how much? We start digging. Well, I've got 30, 40, 60, 80, 100, $120. That's fine. What else do you have? Well, nothing. That's all. Where do you live? He's still probing. In my house? Oh, you have a house? Well, yes, I have a house. Then your house too. I'll have to live in my camper. Oh, you have a camper? The camper too. What else do you have? Well, I have to sleep in my car. Oh, you have cars? Yes, I have 2 of them. Both of them come mine. What else do you have? Well, you already have my money, my house, my camper, my cars. What more do you want? Are you alone in this world? No, I have a wife and 2 children. Oh, yes, your wife and children too. What else do you have? I have nothing left. I'll be alone now. Suddenly the seller exclaims, oh, I almost forgot. You yourself too. Everything becomes mine. Wife, children, house, money, cars, camper, and you too. Then he goes on and says, now listen, I'll allow you to use all these things for the time being, but don't you ever forget, just as you are, they're mine. And whatever I need, whenever I need any of them, you give them up, because now I'm the owner. I don't know what you thought we was going to be talking about being a servant, but this is it. If you're a true servant, you got nothing. Not one single thing. Even that body you're in right now, it don't belong to you. The wife, the kids, the friends, the money, the cars. Well, isn't it amazing how we not only have that stuff, we go over the list. How am I doing? How's the old bank account doing? How the investments doing? How's the car? All. And God, no, wait a minute. Don't get too attached to. Isn't it amazing how attached we get to stuff? I think about this all the time, brother. Stuff in my house, we don't have really expensive, elaborate. Most of you people have been in our house, kind of thing. But the stuff in our house, our furniture and things, are quite valuable to me because they're not worth anything. But it's not the worth, it's their heirlooms. Not before last, Kathy sat in my great-grandmother's rocking chair. We watched a movie together. That old rocking chair is not worth $3, I promise you. But I wouldn't take $3,000 for it. It's an heirloom. Every time I go down the basement like I did the other night, and I think, well, the house may be blown away when we come back out, I'd never replace those heirlooms. But then again, I remind myself, they're not mine. I've got nothing. The house is not mine. The stuff is not mine. Isn't it neat, though, to get to use this stuff for a little while, enjoy it, and then it goes. I promise you, my boys will go through there, and they'll get rid of that junk. They'll sell it for nothing. They may take 2 or 3 things home and say, we can keep this, because I like the looks of it. It don't mean nothing to them. I guarantee you. Not one of my saddles, not one of the things. It's just kind of, maybe they might keep 1 or 2 things, but for the most part, because there's not much value. But isn't it amazing how attached we get to things? And it's not just because of their material value. It's because that was grandma's, or that was grandpa's, or that was my dad's, or somebody. And God said, well, yeah, that's okay to have it, but you don't forget who it really belongs to. It's God's. And you're God's too. Well, this is the answer.
One question, and you maybe also get there.
Okay.
So in the story you just told me, he gave up all these things for the pearl. So what is the pearl?
The pearl of great price is the kingdom, and your place in the kingdom as far as it's concerned. And that's being the servant. You say, go, because we don't get to be the servant for free. We cough up everything for getting to be the servant as far as it's concerned. And of course, in a secondary sense, that's it. First sense is Christ. It's all about Him. And when we have Him, He's the pearl, And we got to be willing to give everything we've got to do that. Any other comment? Okay, but that's it. Okay, but it's a hard lesson to teach, and it's a harder one even to learn. All these things we're talking about is hard stuff. The servants are known for 3 things: they give, they forgive, and they forget. If I'm really a servant tonight, I give. Give what? Like we've been talking about tonight, brethren. Everything. And if you notice how a lot of the stuff, it's not about the stuff. It's not about the money a lot of times. We give time, effort, influence, encouragement. It's just this given thing. The servant, a true servant. If you're a true servant tonight, I'm a true servant tonight, I'm a giving unit. It's just give without giving. But then also forgive. There's no such thing as a true servant that doesn't forgive. Who? Everybody. Everybody. Especially those people it's difficult to forgive. God says, you forgive them. You forgive them. Now, I know this cuts deep. It cuts deep for all of us. But there's no such thing as a true servant that doesn't forgive. And then forget. Forget. How many times have you heard it? Maybe you said it. I can forgive, but I won't forget. God says, no, you're going to forgive and you're going to forget. You see? Well, how is that possible? It begins with forgetting you see. Forget you. It's really not about me. It's really not about you. But as long as it's about us, we'll remember it. We got it, you see. But notice those 3 things: give, forgive, and forget. Tozer said, there's 2 classes of Christians: the proud who imagine they're humble, and the humble who are afraid that they're proud. But there should be a 3rd class: the self-forgetting, who leave the whole thing in the hands of Christ and refuse to waste any time trying to make themselves good or humble. They're willing to reach the goal, and they'll reach the goal ahead of the rest of us. What's the point? The point is, forget you. Forget me. That's the thing that made Christ so unique, so wonderful. If he was up here tonight, it'd blow your mind how it wouldn't be about him. But that's Jesus. We all came out to see, well, yeah, we did. We came to see him, but he'd go, it's not about me. It's about the Father. Let me just show you the Father. You see? This is the key. This is the key. It's not only the key, but this is the very thing that'll keep so many people, so many Christian people, out of heaven. Because we're so determined to go, no, wait a minute, but what about, don't I get some credit? Don't I get, no. It's really not about us, you see. When we get us out of the picture and go, it's about Him, then it all changes. The answer is not to go away from here and say, I'm going to be the most humble person that's ever been in the world. Just forget it. Forget yourself, like Jesus. Let others be your byword. Put others before us. Our last blank there is not. Go away from here. We'll take a short break and then we'll have our devotional.
Good evening. Hope it has been a good week for you thus far, up to this point in the week, and I hope today has been good for you. We're at that midway point. It's good to see each of you here with us tonight to get that extra little boost, as sometimes we say, for the rest of the week. It's one way of looking at it, at least. Hope you've had good classes tonight. I assume as much. I know we at least had a fun class. I don't know. I had, like Rod says, I had fun. Whether anybody else did or not, ask them. A few announcements for this evening before our Devo. This Sunday, there will be a going-away party for Alan and Parla Fletcher in the fellowship building following the morning service. We are having a taco pile. That's all that it says is taco pile. I'm thinking it's like a pile up or pile on or something there. Anyway, so yeah, that. Hope you can make that. I better just keep reading the announcements. Okay. There's a couple of different directions I could go here. I could go nice. I could go mean. I could go sappy. So, yes. Okay. Today was her last day in the office, for those that don't realize that. If you want a shoulder to cry on, or you got a shoulder for me to cry on, and that's all, I'm not necessarily joking about that. We're going to miss her, and Alan too. We're going to miss both of them, I know, and I'm just saying that to say the obvious with the Fletchers. To keep reading the announcements, our Mountain Man, not morning, axe throwing is rescheduled for March 12th. This is for everyone. This is what we were going to have last Sunday evening. Please sign up for that, still on the bulletin board. The old sign-up's still up there, so I don't actually know for sure what we're going to do there. I guess if you're not going to be able to make it on the 12th, mark your name out, okay? Will that work? I don't know. We'll work something out. The one problem with that is that that's our change clocks Sunday. And so, if you're wanting to compete that night in axe throwing, make sure you get a good nap that Sunday afternoon so you're at your top performance. That's how I'm thinking about it anyway. I don't have a competitive side, just so we're clear. There are several sign-up sheets still on the bulletin board in the foyer. Please stop and take a look. April 1st is still our upcoming Ladies' Day with guest speaker Kathy Pollard. April 2nd through 5th then, that next Sunday through Wednesday, will be our gospel meeting with guest speaker Neil Pollard. And then for the teachers for this quarter that began this evening, if you were looking for new material, that is in the office. Then we also express congratulations to Crew Vignal. He was awarded the Worthy Warrior Award at Hammond Schools for the month for being a student of high character. Let's be excited for Crew. And a minute ago I walked over and made sure that he was the right one. This Crew Vignal right here. And then if you want to mark, the invitation song will be 943. 943. And then if you'd like to take your Bible or your phone or your tablet or whatever you have with you tonight to access the scriptures, let's turn together to Matthew chapter 15. Matthew chapter 15. And what I have to share tonight, to give some sort of behind the scenes or transparency, this was something I'm taking and adapting from something I read for some personal devotional material for myself earlier this week. And so it was some thoughts on the importance of recognizing our ultimate problem. And that sometimes as humanity we talk about issues, we discuss communicational problems, we discuss things that are psychological, different things that break down, that harm our relationships, or different things, our interactions with people that aren't healthy. All of those, we could keep talking about all the different things that get tossed around, either in the news media, in society in general, our own conversations. But that as humanity, at least this side of eternity, our ultimate problem is sin. Is sin. I'm not saying that every issue in a relationship is a sin one, but that all of our problems tend to go back to sin. And sin goes back to our hearts. In Matthew chapter 15, Jesus debates with some of the Jewish leaders about traditions. And then it leads into the issue of certain things that you eat, and do you have to wash your hands before you eat for traditional sake? This is not even about hygiene for them. Can you eat certain things? Can you eat catfish, for example? Although that's not in the text, but that would be part of the discussion. And as he's describing the fact that it's not about what goes into your mouth, here's what he says in Matthew 15, verse 19. He says, "For out of the heart," the problem is what comes out of your mouth when you speak, or what comes out of your heart when you act. Out of the heart, he said, this is Matthew 15, verse 19, "come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false witness, slander." It's a pretty thorough list, although it's not meant to be every sin, of course. And then in verse 20, he brings it home and he says, these are what defile a person. These are what cause, in this case, some kind of issue with cleanliness and purity and holiness. This is what makes you filthy. To put it another way, this is the problem. The problem is not about what you eat or whether you wash your hands or some ritual. The human problem goes back to sin, and sin goes back to our hearts. There's more to it that's beyond a Devo. We could talk about Satan and temptation. That's another Devo, maybe next week or something. But then he says, but to eat with unwashed hands, to make it clear that that's not the problem, does not defile anyone. And then I'll share with you that someone wrote about sin. Reflecting on passages like this, they said sinful hearts are self-centered at their core. People who sin, or sinful people, are not naturally motivated by a love for others. Sin is what is driven by what we want, when we want it, how we want it, and where we want it, no matter what. Sin shrinks our awareness. Our field of concern comes down to my wants, or ours, if you want to make it plural, my needs and my feelings. It's me in the center. It's me in control. It's me writing my own rules. And then this next line, and then we'll conclude. He says, sin tells me that I have a right to state my opinion, and I have a right to express it however I wish. I have a right to call you out, to put you down, to dismiss your feelings, no matter the damage or the consequences. I'm not saying that Christians, as a general rule, are sinful or full of sin. Because of Jesus, I think we can move to where that might not be totally accurate. But regardless of any of that discussion, if we're still human, and I think we are, we're going to sin. We're going to have problems that are sin-related problems. And it still comes down to what's happening on our inside. And it's not about this ticker. It's about our hearts, our minds, our inner person. So what do you do about that? If you're not a Christian, then that's where you start. You come to Jesus for cleansing, for purity. You're immersed, submitting to that, to be washed as you're baptized. Not in water that has the power, that's how we do it, but the spiritual cleansing of Jesus' blood is what we're receiving. And then as a child of God, yes, we want to live for Him, but there's going to be those times where we're going to have to come to Him and confess and request cleansing. Before we sing this song, turn with me to one other passage, Psalm 51, the 51st Psalm. We know this psalm as the psalm that David writes, we might say post-sin and post-forgiveness. The psalm is written where he's still seeking forgiveness for what he did when he not only had, we say it today, he had an affair, but when he committed adultery with Bathsheba, murdered her husband, and tried to move on like nothing happened. And we do that with our sin. All of that. We might not actually commit murder, but we try what we do what we can to keep things going, and nobody's going to know. Here's part of what he writes in Psalm 51, verse 8. Let me hear joy and gladness. Let the bones that you have broken rejoice. Hide your face from my sins and blot out my iniquities. Verse 10 that we like to sing in song, create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Cast me not away from your presence, and take not your Holy Spirit from me. Verse 12, restore to me the joy of your salvation, and uphold me with a willing spirit. Sin is our problem. Jesus and his blood is where we go to solve it. Let's stand and sing together.